Yay, we're recording and welcome. So happy to have all of you here for number 11 out of 12 of our Rock Around the Zodiac from Chodesh Nisan and Aries all the way around the circle, which we'll be coming back to very shortly. Why? Because it's almost the end of the circle. We're on the 11th zodiac sign from the beginning, the 11th house, so to speak, in the chart, and the zodiac sign of Aquarius. And very happy to be here. And it just so happens, I didn't plan it this way because it's all about the Aquarian Mini Yeshiva calendar and juggling classes and trying to find space for one-off classes. Today is the first day of solar Aquarius. The sun enters Aquarius today. But Chodesh Shevat already started several days ago. Today is on the Hebrew calendar, it's the 6th day of Shvat. But today the sun enters Aquarius at 12:40 p.m. Pacific time. So it'll be happening right as we're talking about Aquarius. It's like a segula. We should have little Aquarian symbols all around us, like drawing down the Shefa from above. But you know, it's good and fun to manifest things from the outside, and sometimes it's really helpful, and it always has been helpful to our ancestors to have some sort of a segula and some sort of a totem, you know, to focus the intentionality on. For Aquarian, I'm going to say it's going to be my iPhone because there's nothing more Aquarian than technology. It's the ruler, it's the planetary ruler. What's the zodiac sign ruler? The modern planetary ruler, as we'll get into, is Uranus, which is the planet that rules technology. So somebody keep an eye out on the clock, and at 12:40, we can all hold up our telephones and call upon the energy of rebellious revolutionary Aquarius to help us in our life right now. And don't forget, Aquarius is the sign of the Jewish people, as we've discussed many times, as our commentators have told us. At the same time that they're telling us there is really no mazal for us, they're telling us how we are related to all the planets. And, you know, we don't have a sign, but if we did, it would be Aquarius. And we know why. We're going to talk about that. So, and of course, everybody has Aquarius somewhere in their natal chart because everybody has all 12 signs. So let me just share the screen here. You know, what I forgot to do, I wanted to embed the fifth dimension's age of Aquarius. Maybe we'll play it later just because it's fun, you know. So here we are, Mazal Dali, the bucket. And everybody here, I think, has been through this class maybe once or more, but I just want to reiterate why we're even talking about this in the first place. Why are we talking about Jewish astrology? Because there's a difference of opinion in some communities as to what the role of astrology is to a Jewish person. On one hand, you have ultra-Orthodox people saying, Ein mazal Yisrael. You know, this is a mocking satire thing that I created as a graphic to sort of illustrate my feelings about what it was like to move to Israel in 2007 as an astrologer, and having a huge Haredi community on one hand saying, oh, astrology, it's asur, it's forbidden because it says in the Shulchan Aruch, you should not inquire of the astrologers or consult lots. And they took that completely literally, and fine. But on the other hand, there are hundreds and thousands of astrological motifs that we have in our material culture that have been recovered and saved and around since antiquity that have astrological motifs on them. All the ritual objects, household ephemeris, and of course all the textual evidence that show that astrology was just regular common component in the lives of the Jewish communities. Not in the way that you would think of it now, in terms of like nobody had their horoscope written up in the local newspaper. That wasn't like a thing, but people understood the archetypes of the astrological signs and symbols as relating to the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 months of the Jewish year, and even to the point of understanding the common characteristics of people born under certain zodiac signs or the influence of certain planets. So of course there's gorgeous, and Monday, God willing, we'll go and see it together, these beautiful painted astrological motifs all over the wooden synagogues of Poland, and of course the famous mosaic synagogue floors in northern Israel. There's just so many of them. So what is this whole zodiac all about? In Jewish astrological thought, it can all be found in a succinct paragraph from the book of Bamidbar in the desert, where it describes the encampment of the tribe of Israel around the Mishkan, around the tabernacle, the encampment that was reenacted 42 times over a 40-year period. The 40-year period of their wandering, they always assembled for a few days or a few years at a time. 42 times. 42 is the number of, the secret of the universe, so to speak. So there was a mystical reason why they had to do it this way and that number of times to enact this energetic model of our sacred mandala that reflects the actual constellations above. So think about it. You're in the desert. You're in the desert for 40 years wandering around. There's no TV, there's no HBO, there's no electricity. When the lights go out at night, all you have is torchlight, maybe some candlelight, and you have the stars above you and all of the zodiacs around you in the same configuration as you're told to encamp, always the same way. Yehuda always to the east, Ephraim always to the west, Dan to the north, Reuben to the south, and the other tribes arrayed as above, so below. This is like classic Neoplatonic thinking, but it's the micro and the macro and that sort of reflective reality that is documented right in our very Torah. And of course, in not just in art and architecture, but in text and piyutim and song. I like, because we're going to be talking about Saturn again today, because Saturn is the classical ruler of Aquarius, this very famous Keter Malchut that is sung still to this day on Yom Kippur by the Sephardim. It starts out, who shall attain to thy exaltation? For thou hast encompassed the sphere of Saturn with an eighth sphere of encompassment, and it is laden with the 12 constellations on the line of the belt of its ephod, and all the higher stars of cloudland fixed in its rigidity. So it's very specific, like, we really had a very, very specific scientific, as much as possible, all things considered, the state of science, understanding of the stars throughout our history. So now today, the beginning of solar Aquarius, when the sun crosses the ecliptic at 0 degrees Aquarius, which was the degree of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction of December 21st, which we experienced a few weeks ago, and maybe some of you came to the summit we had on that day around this subject, the great conjunction of these two planets, Jupiter and Saturn, which have everything to do with historical astrology, conjunct in Aquarius for the first time since the year 1405. And today the sun crosses that point. So today is a astrological trigger of that event itself. So kind of be on the lookout today for that kind of energy. Aquarius is the water bearer, Dali, the bucket. The archetype is like the individualist. Aquarius is the servant of the water, as we'll see later in quote. This is from the Bnei Yissachar, who says, as Israel is the servant of the Torah, as the Dali, the bucket, is the servant of the water, Israel is the servant of the Torah, and we're to serve Torah. Okay, so you see the bucket here in this Machzor from Germany in 1240. This is Chodesh Shevat, the month of Aquarius, from a Megillat Esther, Italian, 18th century. So he's got like two water buckets there that he's pouring. This is from one of the synagogue floors in Tiberias, 4th century, the Dali. It's classical Greek symbolism there for water bearer, a man with the big bucket there pouring water, very, very symbolic on very many levels. And then we have another kind of male figure here, Mazal Shvat Dali from a Machzor from Vilna in 1844. So one of the archetypes, some of the main archetypes around Aquarius is the wise fool, the lunatic, the lonely eccentric. In the tarot deck, I believe that Aquarius is the Fool card. Aquarius is known as like humanists, reformers. They're innovative, they're eccentric, individualists, originators. Unique is one of their key words. There's a rebellious energy about them. They're very idealistic, so they're utopian-minded. They're good abstract thinkers. They're inventive, and I like to call Aquarius the mad scientist because it really kind of sums up that personality type in some way. So it's also the tribe of Asher and the Hebrew letter Tzadi, and the Tikkun of eating. And that is accomplished via the Kabbalistic Seder of Tu B'Shvat that the Aquarian Minion is going to be hosting one of those next week. So stay tuned for more information about that. This is Shvat as a Dali, as a bucket from a silver Torah crown from 18th century Ukraine, another sacred object. So if astrology is so forbidden, why are astrological symbols all over Torah crowns in from communities? I would like to know. Okay, and this is Shvat, a more modern representation of Aquarius from the ceramic tiles from 1924 in Israel in the Bezalel art studio. And this is a very weird representation because this is like that fishtail of Capricorn that we talked about last month. And it's like the trident of Neptune. So it's a very ambiguously unique and different representation of the water bearer. Like, okay, I get the water, but it's also incorporating a lot of the other archetypes that have that Saturn holdover from it. And here, of course, the famous hand with the pail, that is very common. So the Bnei Yissachar, in his discourses on Chodesh Shevat, says that according to astrology, Aquarius is the sign of the Jewish people, because although Israel is above the constellations and through prayers and good works can obtain their true desire regardless of the determination of the constellations, their natural manifestation of Israel is associated with this astrological sign, and literally says, as the pitcher is the servant of the water, Israel is the servant of the Torah. And I think that my experience of the Aquarian Minion, through which yeshiva we're currently broadcasting this, and which I am the executive director of at this present time, there's something about the Aquarian Minion that's very Aquarian. I think that Reb Zalman, who was a Leo, the opposite of Aquarius, so he could really see all the way across the zodiac, could really see there was something very Aquarian about the Aquarian Minion. So disruptivegeniuses.com, I guess you could say, before their time and also kind of misunderstood. But we're not going to talk so much about how it manifests in the Aquarian Minion. I'm just saying that it's just so karmic in a way that Aquarius would be the, associated with the Minion in this way, considering all the archetypes. So these are two representations of a combination of the two Saturn-ruled signs of Capricorn and Aquarius, because, of course, before they discovered the planet Uranus, Saturn was the ruling planet of both Capricorn and Aquarius, and Capricorn and Aquarius are the only two signs of the zodiac that are next to each other and have the same planetary ruler. So they kind of flow into each other. So you see the bucket and the goat motif from this Machzor in Germany in 1290, and another kind of mid-13th century German representation. So where are we in our journey that started over here in the east with Yehuda in Chodesh Nisan? We're all the way around here. Here we are in Aquarius. We're in this quadrant of the zodiac the northeastern quadrant of the zodiac. These are the handmaidens kids. Okay, we last month we talked about Bilhah and Rachel, which is the tribe of Dan, and that's Capricorn. Now we're talking about Zilpah, who was the handmaiden of Leah, who gave birth to Asher, which is Aquarius. And then next month, our last in the series, we're back to Bilhah and Rachel with Naphtali and the month of Adar, which is Purim. So you can see how far around we've gone. So if you just look at this representation, which I understand is not going to be very easy to see, but I'll just try to show you to the best that I can. You see how our full moon holidays are across from each other. So the full moon holiday of Chodesh Shevat is Tu B'Shvat, and the full moon holiday across the Jewish year is Tu B'Av, which is during when the sun is in Leo and the moon is full in Aquarius. This year, the sun is, well, this year, as in every year during Aquarius, the full moon is in Leo. So the full moon in Leo on Tu B'Shvat is opposite of Tu B'Av. And then, of course, our most famous full moon opposition holidays is Pesach and Sukkot, which are both Aries, Libra, and Libra Aries. So these are our full moon holidays. And Purim, of course, is a full moon holiday. And we're going to talk about what might be the missing link over here that is invisible in Chodesh Elul, but maybe it will come out in Mashiach times. I don't know. We'll see. So we'll talk about that next month. So Shvat Aquarius corresponds to the calves in medical melothesia. This is our famous Zodiac Man. Zodiac Man was a figure that was in medical manuals during the medieval times that associated the planets and the constellations with different body parts so that physicians could know what to do. And they would make segulot or amulets with symbols and signs and pictures on them, or sometimes they used other material objects like feathers or stones that were intended to draw down the spiritual power from the heavens to that body part for healing. So it was regularly used. So the calves, and it's crazy, like last night, my legs were kind of freaking out and I was having like major calf, what are those called? Cramps. And I was like, oh no, this is terrible. And with Aquarius coming, why is this happening? I think because it's a very cold sign. It's very, Chodesh Shevat is one of the cold seasons. Shvat is symbolized by the combination of letters that form the divine name. We've been going all around the 12 possible permutations Kabbalistically of the four-letter name of the creator of He, and for Shvat it's He, Vav, Yud, He. So we're almost to the end next month, Pisces, and then we're back to Yud and He and Vav and He during Chodesh Nisan. So because, again, the modern planetary ruler wasn't discovered until the 1700s, the Talmud, which was not written in the 1700s, minus like 1,000 years plus, 1,500 years, only knew as far as Saturn. So again, the same quote for Saturn for Aquarius as was for Saturn in Capricorn last month. He who was born under Saturn will be a man whose plans will be frustrated. Others say all nefarious designs against him will be frustrated. That goes both ways, Saturn. So Asher is an interesting tribe. The blessing of Asher was from his father Jacob was, from Asher shall come fat bread, so to speak, rich foods, and he will provide delicacies of a king. This talks about the bounty that flows from the territory of Asher. There were so many olive groves there. Oil flowed like a fountain. He had so much bounty that he was constantly providing for his other brothers, so to speak. The other tribes of Israel received so much from him because he was so blessed, okay? Let's see. Yeah, so the Gemara has this whole story about these traders from Laodicea looking for oil, and they looked everywhere and they finally ended up in Gush Khalev in Asher's territory in the Upper Galilee. And of course, they didn't have enough kalim, enough vessels to even bring home as much oil as they could have. So this is just a story about where everybody else is lacking, Asher has bounty. It's interesting to note that the holy city of Tzfat, which is one of the 4 holy cities of Eretz Israel, and each one of them corresponds to one of the 4 letters in the divine name of Yud and He and Vav and He. So Tzfat is the Yud, Tiberia is the upper He, the upper waters, Jerusalem is the connector, the Vav, and Hebron is the lower He. Anyway, Tzfat is the city where the Lorelai Kabbalah was born from, and everybody thinks of Tzfat as the Kabbalistic city. Many of us have been there, lived there, or visited, or have friends who are there. Hello, Goldfarbs, we love you. And Tzfat is in the territory of Asher, and the water and oil of the Torah via Kabbalah comes from Tzfat and drips down into the rest of the land of Israel and flows out into the world. So the Midrash plays with this verse and reads it, from Asher shall come beautiful women, this verse here that's in the Torah, because bread is like a sly reference to women, as in, except for the bread he eats, which is what Joseph said about Potiphar, like everything has been given to me in his house except for the bread he eats, meaning his wife. That's how Rashi interprets it. This really, in a bigger way, speaks of the ability of Aquarius to bless the world with abundance of Aquarian traits, innovation, genius, idealism, the high ideals of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, and brotherhood or siblinghood. Then there's the blessing of Moses to Asher. Of Asher, he says, blessed be Asher with sons. Let him be the favorite of his brethren, and let him dip his foot in oil. So Rashi, who's called the brother of the Torah, so he's important, most important commentator probably, says that because the women who came from Asher were beautiful and they were sought after for marriage, his daughters were married to high priests who were anointed with olive oil. Well, that's very nice. But there's a lot of backup midrashim on that about the daughters of Asher and their particular beauty and how they tended to marry into the high priest families. Well, if I was a high priest who owned no land, I would also want the daughter of a rich man, right? Because if the tribe of Asher was so rich and the daughters of Asher came with tremendous wealth to the sons of Levi, and the Leviim have no land holdings of their own. So, there's also the economic reasons behind it, perhaps, but that's not as romantic as this. So let's let them have their fun this way, okay? Here's the flag of Asher, which is depicted as an olive tree from the early 20th century. So even to this day, we think of Asher as the olive tree. So I want to talk a little bit about the reputation of Aquarius as being like a detached sign, detached emotionally into some way, like not emotionally overwrought necessarily, although they do get apoplectic with rage sometimes when they're filled with righteous indignation, but they're not inherently jealous. They're kind of famous for not being jealous, okay? That's one of the characteristics of Aquarius. And here, the archetype, you can see it in Asher. To Zilpah's second son, Leah gave the name Asher, praise. For she said, unto me all manner of praise is due, for I have brought my handmaiden into the house of my husband as wife. Sarah did also, but only because she had no children. And so also with Rachel, but for me, I had children, and nevertheless I subdued my passion. And without jealousy, I gave my handmaid to my husband as wife. Verily, all will praise and extol me. And she also said, as the women will praise me, so the sons of Asher will in time to come praise God for their fruitful possession in the Holy Land. So this archetype of the ability to emotionally detach oneself in the service of a greater good is very stereotypically Aquarian. As an astrologer, I can guarantee that, and I like the way that it's really hinted at there. So Aquarius, classical planet Saturn, modern planet Uranus. By the Arizal, the Arizal talks about Tevet and Shevat corresponding to the two eyes. The Aquarius by Saturn still has to do with limitations, boundaries, and borders, but also wisdom, innovation, individuality, and genius, which is the Uranian traits. Saturn also gives Aquarius understanding, wisdom, self-examination, contemplation, the ability to penetrate the veil of materiality to discern what lies deeper. And of course, the planet Saturn, Shabbtai, Shabbat, ruled by Saturn in the system of planetary days. So Saturday, the Yom Shabbat, starting Friday night, ending Saturday night, is the day of Saturn, which belongs to both Aquarius and Capricorn. Okay. So here's some of the archetypes and the characteristics of both Uranus and Saturn as they manifest in the sign of Aquarius. So Saturn is strict, Uranus is erratic, Saturn is structured, Uranus is unpredictable, Saturn is traditional, and Uranus is original. Saturn rules wisdom and Uranus rules genius. Saturn rules limitation and Uranus is way out of bounds. Saturn's temperament is melancholy and Uranus's temperament is nervous. So by Saturn, we have philosophers and wise people, hermits, monks, and the elderly, ancestors, lawmakers, judges, and critics, bosses, mentors, sculptors, architects, and builders. But by Uranus, we have the inventors, the technicians, the anarchists, the astrologers, the revolutionaries, eccentrics, mad scientists, heroes of freedoms, the futurists, and creators. By Saturn, it's the development of the autonomous personality. By Uranus, it's the realization of freedom and individual and human rights. We talked about this last time. We talked about this a few times about Saturn and its relationship to Saturday. So here we've got the letter Tzadi, which is the ruling letter of Shvat. As it says in the Sefer Yetzirah, God gave rule to Tzadi and tied a crown to it and combined one thing with another and formed it with it Aquarius in the world, Shvat in the year, and the right foot in the body. So also it rules the taste and tasting. It's an air sign, of course, even though it's a water bucket. So everybody thinks Aquarius is a water sign. It's not. It's an air sign. It's the fixed air sign. Fixed is one of the three modalities: cardinal, fixed, and mutable. Cardinal initiates things, fixed establishes things, and mutable transforms things. So Aquarius is the fixed air sign that is establishing thought, because air is thought. Fire is inspiration, air is thought, water is emotion, and earth is manifestation. Okay, oops, wait a second. So there's an interesting thing that I'm just like you to look at these letters, okay, Tzadi and Ayin, because according to the Ari, Tevet and Shvat correspond with the two eyes, and the eyes in the summer month are Tammuz and Av, because there's that whole thing about those two times of the year being given over to Esav to a point. So it's the dichotomy between Saturn's 2 months of Tevet and Shvat and opposite the moon and the sun. So we'll look at that a little bit more later in a different diagram, but I just like to look at these two letters, how they resemble each other in weird ways that are kind of opposite. You know, they're the only two letters that are shaped like in this sort of configuration. So we talked about this last month, but if you weren't here, Saturn in the Aquarius archetype gives, you know, is wise and mature, also the wise fool, the considerate person, the humanitarian, the independent idealist, somebody who's charmingly eccentric, and the best friend, because Aquarius rules the 11th house of the zodiac that has to do with friends and friendships, your community, the collective, the klal, and affinity groups that you belong to. When Aquarius is wounded or undeveloped, you get crazy, unsociable, misanthropic, cold, lunatic, eccentric, withdrawn, unpredictable, and anything from slightly crazy to stark, raving, mad, and friendless people. Let's be nice to Aquarians and not make them do that, because it can be very, very unpleasant. I'm not going to talk about my personal experience with somebody like that. Not going to talk about it. It's interesting in modern psychological astrology. I like to point to the work of Liz Green. She's a wonderful astrologer and writer, one of the founders of the Uranian school of psychological astrology. And I really wanted her for the conference we did on the 21st, but it was impossible to get in touch with her. Anyway, she wrote a book some time ago called Saturn, A New Look at an Old Devil. How Liz Green and modern astrology reads Saturn in a natal chart is not this malevolent, destructive, difficult energy, but it's really about the journey of individuation and the development of the self, and looking at Saturn as a psychic process by which people learn from their mistakes. They utilize difficult experiences like pain and restriction and discipline as a means to develop greater consciousness and fulfillment and maturity. So what I like to say as an astrologer when I do people's chart and I'm talking about Saturn is that Saturn is the skeleton that the rest of the personality hangs on. It's not the prettiest part of the human body, but without it, there's no structure. And that's true in terms of Saturn, because Saturn's journey through the zodiac, 28 and a half, 29 years, you've heard of your Saturn return, your second Saturn return, your third Saturn return. Every time Saturn comes back to the original placement, to his original placement in a person's individual natal chart, it's always a time of reckoning and fork in the road and decisions, and having to call things and make boundaries against things that are not working for you, and readjust to be able to reach the goals ahead that you have for yourself. So Aquarius is very motivated by originality and hunger for knowledge. Aquarius really wants to know everything. And so as we were talking before, Aquarius is opposite Leo and the sun in the zodiac. So the sun is the ego, Saturn is the super ego, right? Uranus and Aquarius opposite the sun is also interesting, because Uranus was Saturn's father, and the sun is one of the father archetypes, like father, sun, sister, moon, or the father. It's really not, it's brother, sun, sister, moon, but it's really father, sun, mother, moon, right? So Aquarius strives for utopia or stoic tranquility. Key words like I know this, or I know that I don't know anything. They need to feel special. They have a sense of uniqueness about them, and they need to have that uniqueness acknowledged. And where Aquarius is in your individual natal chart is the part of your personality that you feel is the unique place that needs to be acknowledged, and or the position of your natal Uranus in your natal chart. Aquarius is into overcoming the old to bring innovation into the world, and always needs to feel special, as I said. Great humanists, philosophers, reformers, rationalists, and Aquarius topples the old values in order to replace them with new ones. We're seeing that a lot, right? So here's that same opposite of Aquarius, Saturn, and the sun, and the moon and Capricorn. So Saturn, moon, sun, and you see how they manifest at the top and the bottom here. So you have to keep flexible with the archetypes. When you're talking about astrology, you're talking about a language of symbols and archetypes. So along with all of these things that I've been teaching you, I hope that I'm also teaching you how to talk astro speak and how to speak in the language of symbols and archetypes. Excuse me, sorry, I need some water here. We talked a little bit last month about the 4 classical temperaments, and this was how people were evaluated back in the day. They thought that the bodily humors had something to do with personality types, right? So Hippocrates invented this, and for Aquarius is sanguine. Is that even how you say that? Does anybody know if I'm saying that right or wrong? And Capricorn.
Yeah, sanguine.
Is it sanguine?
Sanguine.
Sanguine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Aquarius is sanguine. You know, it's funny because words I read all the time but never pronounce, that comes under that category. And Capricorn is melancholy. So those are the 2 manifestations of Saturn between these 2 signs. So this is another thing that we talked about a little bit last time about Saturn's Jews, this great book by Moshe Adel, which gives, it's a book that will give every possible reference that you want into our texts, our Masorah, and everything textual that we have on the planet Saturn and how it's related to the Jewish people. So when we say that Saturn is the planet of the Jewish people, we are not fooling around. We're seriously saying that this is how Jewish astrological and philosophical thought has regarded Saturn and Aquarius. So I want to talk a little bit about Uranus. I'm anxious not to leave Uranus out. Somebody's typing and has their microphone on, by the way. Okay, thank you. So Uranus was discovered in March of 1781. Was the first planet that was ever discovered from time immemorial, when humans first crawled out of the primal ooze onto dry land and looked up into the sky and saw the stars until March 13th, 1781. Everybody thought there were only the 9 classical planets, so to speak, and that includes the moon, of course. So it's not, the 7 classical planets, but there's not 7 planets. This is the 7th planet. It takes 84 years to go around the zodiac. It's got a very long orbit. It stays an average of 7 years in each sign. Just to give you a little contrast on that, Saturn, which was thought of as the outermost planet, stays 2.5 years in each sign. Jupiter stays about 12 to 13 months in each sign, and those stay longer than the other planets, which are Mercury, Venus, and Mars. So it's the archetype, again, of the wise fool, the hero of freedom, the revolutionary, and on the flip side, the traitor, the great liberator. It is in charge of surprising changes, flashes of inspiration, sudden upheavals. This feeling of like a Chodesh, getting something like that light goes on over your head. That's Uranus. That's the function of Uranus, is like divine inspiration, not something you thought out and discovered after research. That's Saturn. So it's that, big light bulb going off over your head. They're very unconventional, restless, original. The urges towards cosmic consciousness, expansion of consciousness. And also the Uranian energy is very unsettled and erratic, always searching for something new, and nervous energy. I like this picture of Uranus because it shows that it's a weird planet, okay? And weird is one of the keywords of Aquarius too. Weird, different, unique. It's the only planet that is named after a Greek god instead of a Roman god. And of course, it was very right that they named it Uranus, because Saturn was the father of Jupiter. So the new planet should be named after the father of Saturn, because Saturn was the last planet that was at the edge before they discovered Uranus. And unlike every other planet, Uranus is tilted so far that it basically orbits the sun on its side, with the axis spinning, nearly pointing at the sun. Scientists and astronomers think this is because it got into a big car crash with a gigantic planet-sized body or several small bodies soon after it was formed. And the seasons on Uranus are crazy. They're all extreme. They last about 20 years each. So it could be very horrible conditions for living. I don't think we're going there at any time to live there. Not until they get straightened out on Uranus. So why does it say that I'm an Aquarius when I was born during either Tevet or Adar? We talk about this every month when we talk about the signs. For instance, today is the day, it's 12:43. Are we already into solar Aquarius now? So as you know, there's that the Chodesh this year started 6 days ago. So if a baby was born after Chodesh Shevat started, but before this afternoon, that baby would be a Shevat Capricorn. So of course, every one of the zodiac signs, depending on where it is on the 19-year Metonic cycle, has this same kind of formula where if there's the overlap of the actual Chodesh and the zodiac sign, and then there's what comes before and what comes after, depending on which year in the 19-year Metonic cycle it happens in. And I really am hoping to produce a gigantic ass chart and database on this for my hopefully upcoming book, Astrolojew, the big book of Jewish astrology. So as I always say and have said frequently so far today, everyone has all 12 zodiac signs in their personal natal chart. Sorry, this still says Dan. I didn't mean Dan. I meant Asher. It's the ruler of one of your houses. And here we have the United States natal chart. Aquarius is the ruler of the third house of the United States. And our moon, our natal moon, is in Aquarius. So the third house is, I think, it's the place of learning, of communications, the immediate environment, the mind, how the mind perceives things and differentiates things, logic, and short journeys. So our emotional self, if we were a person, let's say we're a person called the United States, our sun is in Cancer, but our moon is in Aquarius. And that means that we filter everything through logic, rationality, and idealism, a view towards the future, and our own self-perception of being different, unique, and exceptional, and of course, friendly, because Aquarius rules friendship. And it's also Aquarius is the natal ruler of the 11th house, which is where our natal Saturn is, and our natal midheaven. So we have a very friendly reputation, or at least we had a very friendly reputation up until a few years ago. But it's also true that there's the other side, like we seem very friendly, but then we also do things like invade other countries and overthrow governments that aren't ours, and the things that the CIA has done over the many years. So it's not a superficial friendliness, okay? The moon in Aquarius in the third house makes us talkative, eloquent, communicative. We have to have a say in everything, multilingual, a talent for stealing the spotlight in greatly differing social groups and at every opportunity. That sounds very American. It sounds like the ugly American, the stereotype of like the American that goes to Europe as a tourist. Vivid manners of expression, the desire to acquire knowledge in order to show others that knowledge is gained. Like, look at me, I'm so smart. That's pretty American. So Aquarius is also AI. It's the future. It's technology and science in the service of humanity and humanitarianism. That is also very American, being a leader in science and being a leader in the future. Of course, we had to be the first nation on the moon. We could not live with ourselves. And believe me, I'm sure I haven't actually done an astrological look back on the whole space race, but I would bet you anything that you could talk about it in purely astrological terms, because just the idea that the Soviets got into space before we did, what had to have been absolutely emotionally infuriating for the Americans, because we need to be first in that. Okay. So yes, we are here in the sacred, in the cycle of sacred time in the Jewish year, and we're coming up on an important holiday of Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is when we will gather together, and the night of the 27th, I think it is. Let me check my calendar. Yeah, the night of the 27th. And we will enact a special ritual that was invented by the Kabbalists of Shvat. Shvat, as I said before, being the town of air and related to the sign of Aquarius, because it lives in the world of Asher. And we'll do that together. And through the tikkun of eating, which also has to do with the month of Shvat and Aquarius, we will hopefully enact great mercies on our planet, on all humanity, on Am Yisrael, on our own communities, and in our own selves and in our own lives. And let us all say Amen. I didn't hear anyone say Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen. Baruch Hashem.
Amen.
So who wants to ask a question? So Leah Nofek said in the chat, I couldn't see any of the chat when I was teaching, by the way. So Leah says, Moon in the third house does not fit with the Trump mob. They are anti-intellectual, not rational. That's true. Well, what does actually is happening astrologically to America is that America is having her very first ever Pluto return, because the planet Pluto takes like 248 years to go around and hit itself again. So our values and our wealth and everything that has to do with Pluto are being destroyed and recreated right now. And this is what's happened. This is the background and the foundation of all the other trauma and drama that's going on in the symbolic world. So Mark, what did you want to ask?
So in your astrology conference,
Mm-hmm.
I thought you mentioned something about Dali being the hanged man.
Being the what?
Hanged man?
Oh, that's Tali, T-L-I.
Okay.
D-L-I.
Right.
Yeah, the Tali is the north node in astrology.
Okay.
And of course, it's not spelled T, but if you were transliterating T-L-I. Tali is the dragon in the Sefer Yetzirah. The dragon is dragon in the universe is like a king upon his throne. So that whole verse about the dragon, the ecliptic in the year, is like a king going throughout visiting all of his provinces, and the heart within a man is like a man of war. This is like a complete encapsulation of everything in the world. So it's the Tali is the dragon, the north node of the lunar nodes, which in Jewish astrology we pay extra special attention to. In regular astrology, they're also important, but not as emphasized as it is in Jewish astrology, and also in not Eastern astrology, Vedic astrology, the astrology practiced in India and places in that region of the world. The north nodes are Rahu and Ketu, and they're also extremely, that's something we share with them, even though we share a different system and ways of calculating. We share with Vedic astrology the emphasis on the nodes, because to our mind in Jewish astrology, the nodes by position and sign have to do with our tikkun, our fate, our karma. It's very tied up with like that feeling of destiny and fatedness. And of course, the nodes go around. The nodes go round and round every 19 years in sync with the Metonic cycle, and where they are and how they move through a person's individual natal chart depends, of course, on their own natal placement of the nodes and how that affects them right now. So the nodes are currently in Gemini Sagittarius. You can tell. Trump, Gemini Sagittarius. Trump, Sun in Gemini, Moon in Sagittarius, born on an eclipse, a lunar eclipse in 1946. Okay, so I was just asked, I would like anybody to volunteer to do that. to give a kavana that we might have in mind for this specific Tu B'Shvat. This is going to be, I want to tell you something. It's really great. Oh, your birthday is tomorrow? Oh, you were born on Tu B'Shvat? Leah, you were born on Erev Tu B'Shvat? I don't see you. Leah Novik says she was born on the 14th, so she was born on Erev Tu B'Shvat. Wait, what was I just saying? I was just about to say something really.
I've always done Tu B'Shvat Seders, starting with very large ones in Berkeley.
Are you going to come? Are you going to be part of our Tu B'Shvat Seder that Jonathan should have already called and invited you to?
I don't know.
Okay, if you're able to, I'm inviting you now, and I'm going to send you and him an email later. Okay. So I want to tell you a little bit about Tu B'Shvat coming up. I'm going to tell you that it happens that Tu B'Shvat is one of the best astrological days of 2021. Okay. 2021 is full of all sorts of disruptive, crazy Megillas going on. And we'll see more about that as the year progresses. And Lo Aleinu, we should all be living in peace and health and safety. But the moon goes into Leo on Wednesday in the late afternoon, early evening, depending on where you are. On Thursday, the 28th, the actual day of the full moon of Leo, the day of Tu B'Shvat, Venus, goddess of love and romance, conjuncts Pluto, the god of the underworld and power. This is like a very, very intense, powerfully positive thing, because Pluto's been lonely and having a lot of problems, okay, over the last year. First Saturn and Pluto smashed together, then Jupiter smashed into Pluto 3 times. This was all during 2020. Pluto's been through a lot and needs some comfort. So the conjunction of Venus to Jupiter is happening at the same day as the full moon in Leo, which is warm, romantic, loving, generous, prideful, proud. Also, the sun is going to make a conjunction to the planet Jupiter, Tzedek. So Jupiter-Sun conjunctions are always good. In Aquarius, this day has a lot of potential for good. We've had a lot of bad days, and we need something to make up for a lot of the bad days we've had. I don't know if one day can make up for all of the bad days that we've had. I don't know, but I want to bless us that each of us in our own way, individually, and our families, our households, our communities, our country, and our world are able to grab onto some fantastic shefa for the upcoming Tu B'Shvat, and that we're able to connect all of the signs and the symbols and the archetypes of Tu B'Shvat through the foods that we eat and the symbols that we use on our Seder plate to bring knowledge and truth into our lives, and to be blessings like Aquarius, right? Aquarius is supposed to be the water bucket, and the water bucket serves water. It's the servant of the water because it serves water. We're Aquarius, as people, we need to serve Torah, meaning that we need to be like waiters. Can I top off your Torah, your glass of Torah for you, sir? Can I give you some more Torah, ma'am? What does that mean? It means that all of us are a living Torah. It means that the Torah has 70 faces and one of them is yours. So I want to bless all of you that you should know which is your face of the Torah, and you should make that face, punim to everyone and everything around you. That's my blessing.
Amen.
Amen. All right. Okay, so Corolla says Shvat can be seen as an acronym, Chabad teaching for can you say that? I can't read it.
Shenishma besorot tovot.
All right. Amen. That abundance and goodness should bless us all. Amen. May abundance and goodness bless us all. And I want to thank all of you for being here and being a part of this class. Next month, I'm going to be teaching my last class in this series, because we'll be getting all the way to Chodesh Adar, and that will be it. And all of the classes are recorded and are on my personal YouTube channel. If anybody's interested in the link to that, I will be happy to give it to you. I just want to look and tell you what day I'm teaching on, because who remembers one day to another? Okay, so I'm teaching on Adar on February 23rd, which is a month from now, plus a couple of days. So we'll be talking about Adar, Pisces, the tribe of Naphtali, the planet Jupiter, classical ruler of Pisces, and Neptune, the modern ruler. Okay, so I want to wish everyone a beautiful day. See you guys later.
So I would like